Why, hello there, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. My name is Mr. Dogboat333, and welcome to Hearts of Iron 4, the New Order Last Days of Europe. Now, in last video, or last series, rather, we played as a nation of Bureaucratic. That was a good amount of fun, I think. We beat back the Tyrant Yagoda and established a good old-fashioned Leninist state, which is nice and wholesome and all that good stuff. Now we're going to be hopping into the same area of the world, same Russian warlord, but we're going to be notably less wholesome. Spoiler alert. We're going to be hopping in as the nation of Amur. As the Soviet Union rose to power upon thousands upon thousands of Russians fled to wherever they could. From in the east, that was the city of Harbin in Manchuria. Bitter over their defeat in the Civil War and looking for any chance to have redemption or revenge, these exiles turned to the new fascist movement that was just getting off its feet in Europe. Many of the Russians in Harbin embraced fascism as their new rival to communism. None more than Konstantin Radzevsky. The young man was a fiery orator and an open supporter of Hitler's ideology of National Socialism, and he quickly ascended the ranks to become the leader of the Russian Fascist Party in Harbin. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the exiles seeking an opportunity to retake their homeland were quick to strike. With support from Japan, Radzevsky led an invasion of the Russian Far East, declaring his intent to reunite the nation and create a new era of Russian National Socialism. All seemed to be going well, but Radzevsky was betrayed by two competing cliques. The White Army officers had always hesitated to embrace fascism, and when they saw their opportunity to break away, they took it, pledging their alliance to a false czar in Chita. In Magadan, Mikhail Makovsky, long a challenger of Radzevsky's control over the RFP, declared Radzevsky was nothing more than a puppet of genocidal Nazis, and a traitor to the Russian nation. Now Radzevsky is left ruling a rump state, biding his time until he can retake what is rightfully his, and teach the traitors a lesson they won't forget. Very, very interesting. So we're going to be hopping in as the nation of Amur. I usually film these on Twitch, which you're free to follow down the Twitch description box below. You can click the button there, but this is going to be one of the spicier series, I already know, so I am going to refrain from that. And instead, I'm recording this offline. So I'm going to go ahead and get the old timer out, get a bit of a shorter video going for this first time. I'm actually filming this right after I finish the Bureaucratic series, so it might be a little too early to talk about it, but it might be up by the time this is. It might still be uploading. I'm not sure if I'm going to upload this on the Monday or the Sunday, or Sunday, whenever I finish up the uploads of Bureaucratic, which would end up being Tuesday into Wednesday. I'm actually messaging my thumbnail guy right now. Because he's supposed to. I have thumbnails for this originally because I was going to do it, but I've changed how to do my thumbnail, so I'm just keeping in touch with him. When the perfidious Soviet Union collapsed under the stresses of the German invasion and the inherent weakness of the communist system, the Russian Fascist Party and her Japanese benefactors, long in exile in the Manchurian city of Harbin, were afforded an opportunity to take back Russia. Konstantin Radzevsky, voles of the all-Russian government, took it upon himself to begin reclamation efforts in an attempt to seize Russia and save her from the depravities of Bolshevism. Plunging into the Russian Far East, the RFP and her allies in the Old White movement made it as far as the city of Chita before the offensive was stunned. As the advance slowed, cracks began to show under the Tsarists and the fascists, and soon the Whites under Ataman Semyonov seized the city of Chita and officially distanced themselves from the party. The Voz was surprised at this turn of events. He was enraged when former party member Mikhail Matkovsky split the party and set up a rival government in the remote port of Magadan, posing a threat to the Voz's legitimacy and rule. Since then, based in the small town of Zaya, The Vols has become dejected and increasingly paranoid. His closest advisors, Georgy Shekarev and Alexander Bolotov, the head of the party's paramilitary blackshirts and the security minister respectively, have indulged his paranoia, bringing the Vols a list of internal party members who are dissenters and troublesome figures within the regime. The Vols plans on creating a strong Russia based in National Socialism, where the Vols is paramount in a system derived from the Germans is law. However, to do this, he needs to cleanse the party of the people responsible for its failures. The Vols' immediate internal and external threats need to be dealt with before you can focus on ending the Bolshevik remnants to the west. None shall stand in Konstantin Radzevsky's path. For God, nation, and labor. There we go. So we're led by Konstantin Radzevsky, the Vols of the Russians. Get some extra war support, which is nice, but need consumer goods goes up. Not so nice. Konstantin Vladimirovich Radzevsky was always a man of ease. The perceived oppression of the new Soviet system, which he despised from a young age, pushed him to flee Vladivostok and the Union for Harbin, a city in which the emigres thrived. There he became convinced that a system to rival Bolshevism had to be created. He found that system in Europe, where fascism had just been born. The nation ideology was adopted by many Russians, bitter from their loss in the Civil War. A young and charismatic Radzevsky grabbed the chance to unite them all under the banner of a swastika, setting crowds on fire with his speeches. He made a promise to return to his homeland one day and liberate its people. Shortly after its foundation, the RFP forged a close relationship with the new overlords of Manchuria, Japan. The greatest benefactors of the party supported it throughout its entire existence until the opportunity for reclamation came with the collapse of the Presidium. Emboldened by the enthusiasm of his Japanese allies, the leader of the RFP went on a noble crusade to crush Judeo-Bolshevism. However, his dreams of complete liberation were dashed by his rivals, the generals and their czar, and worst of all, Mikhail Matkovsky and his band of traitors who looked across the Pacific for help. Konstantin Radzevsky, left alone in Zaya? I'm not sure. As the leader of a mere warlord state, has become enraged, and has vowed to get revenge against all Russia's enemies, whoever they may be. Jews, Reds, Mitkovskyites, Tsarists, anyone who dares challenge the Vols. To him, it is the only way to restore the nation to its old days of glory. Yet that dream seems further and further away. So we have a couple boosts. We're clerical fascists, which I think is a new one I haven't read before, so I'll go ahead and read it. Fascism is a truly malleable and fickle ideology by nature. Due to this, it has always been able to be adapted to fit the ideological needs and peculiarities of those wielding it, even in the days when it was first adopted by Benito Mussolini. Given the widespread and still heavy influence of religion on millions worldwide, it's not surprising that many fascist movements, ranging from the infamous Iron Guard of Romania to the Stasi of Croatia, have attempted to wield faith in fascism simultaneously in their quest for power and control over the very souls of their nation. Resulting child of this often grotesque pairing is known to the world as clerical fascism. While religious influences within the fascist movements is nothing out of the ordinary, these regimes tend to be extremist, on par in their fanaticism with their National Socialism. They are obsessed with theories of salvation that are bound inseparably with race and the nation in the minds of the practitioners. Unless their vision of purity is achieved, warn these modern-day zealots, their people will soon find themselves damned both here and in the afterlife. Truly, is there anything as dangerous as those absolutely assured of their own righteousness? Hard to be said. We have Alexander Bolotov, who have their own descriptions, actually. Interestingly enough. I might want to read these one of these days. We're going to scroll down. We have Encourage Brutality, Elite Voting, a lot of stuff going on here. We have 85% poverty rate, Jesus, and it's going up. Our literacy is also going down. We're the heirs of Harbin, which I think I've read when I did the Magadan campaign, so I won't worry too much about that. We are a Russian fascist stronghold. After the unholy Union forced the true sons of Russia out, some of them found their way to Harbin, where, under the leadership of Radzevsky, we adopted the ideals of fascism in order to more efficiently fight Bolshevism. As it was in the face of fascism that the unholy Union was shattered, we seem to have made the right call. It is beneath the banner of fascism that the homeland will be reborn, and any despoilers will be run out of it. While we may be confined for now in this desolate land in the Far East, this sorry state is only due to betrayal, internal by Matkovsky and external by the dastardly Japanese. But our perseverance outlasted the red intermezzo, so shall it outlast all other traitors, and the homeland will be reforged in fire. I also have the paranoia of the Vols, which just fucking sucks. Jesus. That's not good at all. The days of Rodzewski as a leader of Amur have taken a toll on him, and so has the ultimate betrayal of Matkovsky and his allies. In twist of irony, a leader of fascists is restored to measures used by the Soviet leaders he wished to bring down so as to secure his hold on power. Anyone who is suspected of being a traitor, an agent, or simply not loyal to the ideas of the RFP is in the crosshairs, and is sooner or later executed by the order of Rodzewski. The effectiveness in Amur has become clear, as less and less capable administrators and commanders are left to govern. Those who do are merely pawns of their leader. Finally, we have the All-Russian Repopulation program by the All-Russian government to bring about the repopulation of Far East. That's not bad. We also have a Flight East, which is the same as the one before, I want to say. We have warlord developments. Nothing too out of the normal here. And this is kind of what we got so far. We got some production units, it would seem. An okay amount, actually. I take that back. We have none. Holy shit, we have nothing. That is not good. Well, my friends, here we are, the true heir of Harbin. Fate was generous to the long-suffering Russian people. It sent Konstantin Vladimirovich Rodzewski in the RFP to its rescue from decades of a Judeo-Bolshevik slaughter. A spark that was ignited through the rightful anger of the young and patriotic exiles of Harbin became a flame that would spread across the Russian Far East, bringing freedom to the oppressed Russians and punishment to the forces of Soviet tyranny. The determination of the fascist heroes, the sacrifices and feats they made in the name of the Russian God, are the true manifest of legitimacy of the RFP, and the dearest vows of as vanguard of a Russian anti-communist struggle. Even our efforts were sabotaged by the betrayal of the Semyonov and Matkovsky cliques. Ours will have never been more firm. Our true purpose, the total liberation of Holy Russia under the fascist banner, only began its incarnation. Either it will mark the greatest point in Russian history, or end in its total subservience to Jewish overlords. So yeah, I think you guys can get a feeling of what kind of guy this Rodzewski is. And what sort of a road we might end up we're gonna have to take down. Let's go work on infantry rifles. We'll get better computing and admin building construction. That works for me. That works for you all. Well, I don't have chat to contradict me or tell me I'm doing something stupid right now, so I'm just gonna assume that what I'm doing is okay. So yeah, I just finished up the Buryatia series. I also did the Magadan series as a Petlin a while back. But other than that, I haven't really played too much in this region. So I did Novosibirsk, Tomsk. Actually, I think Central Russia is going to be the area that I've played. Actually, played these guys twice. Done a bunch of games over here. These guys, these guys, these guys. These guys a couple times at this point. So actually, I've gone from barely playing the Far East to being probably my second most played region in Russia. It's funny how that's played out. I actually tried playing this series before, a fun fact. Just never quite ended up panning out. I want to check our economy. Yeah, we have nothing in the way of GDP. We have bloated reserves, evidently. I'm going to use that to invest in our economy. For most people in Amur, being an RFP interrogation facility would be a surefire death sentence. For Lev Olkatin, the secretary of RFP and right-hand man of the boss, it was just another day of a week. Screams rang out in the dimly lit facility, which Olkatin was touring as part of his official duties, but in a place like this, you learn to make the cries of help into background noise. All the more had. Just once he glanced into a chamber and saw a broken man pleading in a hoarse voice for help. Without a second thought, Olkatin turned away and left him to his fate. Whatever the man had been through, he undoubtedly deserved it. After all, the Vols willed it. Olkatin knew that there was a great moral good to aiding Rodzewski's cause, in spite of the seemingly gruesome nature of it, such as crushing the Bolsheviks that had driven them out of their homes, and the Jews that had guided that disastrous revolution. And in case he knew that Rodzewski was doing the right thing, because he placed trust in his Vols, just as he had trusted him. That was the foundation of their friendship, a bond forged through a mutual hatred of subhumans during the days in Harbin, and strong enough to resist any attempts by lesser men to poison it. Although Okatin had thought, as yet another pain scream filled the air, that last part might not be true anymore. With what Bolotov was capable of and willing to do, he feared the day his own name would be included among those the torturer whispered to Radzevsky, feeding the paranoia of the Vols that Okatin believed in even now. That belief was all he really had. Well, we still remain the true heir of Harbin. What do I want to do here? Oh, we need more grid power. I understand now. Well, shoot, we might actually just want to save up and get more grid power then. Although our infrastructure here overall is just dog. Well, let's contact the Japanese. In the darkest years of communist tyranny, the conscientious and patriotic exiles of Harbin could not ask for a better ally than the magnificent empire of Nippon, a state which did not know the Jewish influence for millennia. It rose as a preeminent power of free Asia that rejected the values of a mercantile and Semitic civilization and cherished honor and tradition. The moral virtues of Japanese are truly the opposite of those of the Jews. The Japanese establishment was not blind to the threat coming from the Soviet Empire and was fully aware of the role of which the RFP was to play in the anti-Bolshevik crusade. It was the Empire of the Rising Sun that directed our efforts towards the recapture of Paramilitary and aided our forces with guns and butter against the Red Armies. Even though Japan withdrew from Russian affairs, it doesn't mean the Empire can no longer assist in our struggle. By any means, the Vols will show himself as a worthy ally to the Chrysanthemum throne and prove his willingness to continue our relationship on good terms. I mean, we might as well not piss everyone else off at this point. The Germans have won the space race. A cold eastern wind rattled the shutters of the vault's office window, whistling as it slipped between the thin wooden slates. Radzevsky shivered and drew the heavy greatcoat closer around his shoulders, closing the fur lining around his neck to try and keep the warmth in. Only his face and hands were exposed to the chilly air of his makeshift headquarters, intense eyes tracing along the page before him as his numb fingers scrawled out a new addition to his Manifesto of Russian National Socialism. The ancient clock on the wall chimed a single peal, signifying that 1 o'clock in the morning had come, as he reached that bottom of the page and downed his pen. It was in the third night of the row that Radzevsky had stayed up late to continue work on his magnum opus. He had thought it completely long ago, but the sudden collapse of Red Authority and the mockery of Russia had maintained had changed the situation. Without the aid of the Japanese, he had gone from Harbin to Distanzia on the River Amur in just a few short days. In that short period of time, just a few years prior, the fortunes of the RFP had changed completely. That hadn't lasted long, of course. The thought of Makovsky's betrayal and split of the RFP stroked the fires of hatred inside the Vault's gut, and he reached for the flask of vodka beside him to quench it. The taste, vile and stomach-churning as a betrayal, did little to soothe his temper, but he ignored it and took another deep swig. It would do its job, eventually. In that, it was just like the assorted rabble that his stately called an army. Cruel, ill-informed, hammered out of whatever was lying around to make something functional. But it was his. It was Russia's. For only here was Russia to be found. Beyond Amur's borders, there lay only traitors, subhumans, and Reds, their collective boot on the throat of the Russian people. Someday he would have his chance. Some days the vodka saw him through one hard day after another. The RFP would see Russia through this trial. Someday. We could train up another unit. I'll train up another one for now. An interesting story, if nothing else. Assassin strikes at Hitler, a house divided. Do external investments. In a small office in Zaya, Mikhail Spasovsky took his cigarette out of his mouth and let out a breath filled with smoke. He was getting old, there's no denying that. That didn't mean he was about to refuse himself the last comfort available to him. Vasai turned his attention to the paperwork in front of him. It was all meaningless messages to and from the Japanese. It was only real allies remaining to the government in Amur. It was Paskovsky's job to make sure they remained friendly to Radzevsky's aims, which usually meant agreeing with everything they said and signing where they wanted him to sign. None of them were really in a position to bargain with Japan, after all. Paskovsky thought back to his youth, when everything had seemed to be hopeful to the cause, when the Black Hundred had been strong and he'd been a member. Now their vision for Russia seemed like a distant dream, with Jews and communists running loose all over Russia and spreading their filth. He hated all of them for that, without question. However, he was now not only old, but incredibly tired. There was enough energy left in him to really care what happened, especially since he had a feeling he wouldn't live to enjoy it. Deciding that he needed to focus just a little more, he put out the cigarette and picked up his pen, returning to his endless work on the foreign affairs of the RFP. Though he might never see it happen, he would at least try to help Radzevsky one day make the Jew and the Bolshevik pay for their disgusting existences. And to the very day he died. And from hell, he would laugh. Go figure, we really need... Well, are we going to get any electricity from Blagoveshchensk? We actually will get some power. Spear is a candidate. If we're getting... I was about to say, if we are getting any of that, I think I'll just invest in infrastructure for now. I think that's what I'll do to start off on. Because we do need infrastructure. Blagoveshchensk is a little town of little worth and even less significance. At least that's how the Japanese see it. We're naming it Hainan Pao when it was annexed into the miserable puppet state of Manchukuo, as they did when they stole the great eastern jewel of Vladivostok. For Radzevsky, however, it means the world, for it's the world's hometown. It is therefore also the birthplace of the RFP and Russian National Socialism. In order to behold the entirety of Russia, it will be the birthplace of a nation itself. As any good nationalist knows, having one home occupied by foreign invaders is an unacceptable state of affairs and does severe harm to the morale of the people. Just as the Tsars would have fought tooth and nail for St. Petersburg, we must have Vladivostok. Thankfully, since neither Japanese nor the Manchu servants have any real interest in the town, they are unlikely to have any good reason for turning down the Vlad's righteous demand for our sovereign territory. We lose a troublesome population and gain our internal gratitude, with the addition of some reasonable concessions to their greedy industrialists, no doubt. I'm sure they'll agree. In the meanwhile, we'll probably do the Free Russian Army, methinks. Yeah, we'll do that for now. The warriors of the Russian Fascist Party are full of further and courage, yet they lack in the training and discipline necessary for an army of the modern age. Our forces, primarily composed of street fighters and militiamen of Harbin, are hardly a match to our closest rivals that have the brightest officers of the white cliques, or at least American mercenaries at their disposal. What else to say about the Bolsheviks, who fasten their soldiery with fierce drill and don't shun any inhuman measures to achieve their pitiable victories? The restoration of Russia is ought to happen, and let it come to happen. The reform of the all-Russian army should become our foremost priority. Our military minds will adopt the experience of the Japanese and White Army elders, and our recruits will be bound by the will of the party and by the military. And the military will become an organic entity, not to be disturbed by internal squabbles. Perhaps one day the world will watch with amazement how a small band of followers would become a force to equal the mighty Wehrmacht. I'll continue a little longer. Alexander Bolotov rose with his son, as he always had, and he would always continue to do so. It was a habit he got into during his youth, and he'd stuck to it. As he rose from bed, the first thing the all-Russian government security minister noticed was a pounding headache. Typical, he muttered to himself, as he swung his legs onto the chilly wooden floor and sat up. He recalled that his briefings were expected by the Vols this morning. Slipping on his clothes, trimming his beard, and preparing for his day, Bolotov had only one thing in mind. As he finished his modest breakfast, consumed out of habit, not hunger, he went back to his bedroom, and from under a false bottomless dresser, he pulled out an ornate wooden box. Once open, Bolotov stared at a nondescript cigarette with a lustful stare. Morphine. He carefully rolled up his sleeve after sitting on his bed and selected a cigarette. Unsheathed its needle, he picked up the phone he kept on his nightstand and dialed Vladimir Golubtsov, one of his many scions. As the line rang through, Bolotov jammed the thread into his arm. Almost immediately, his headache began to recede, and his muddled brain fog began to clear. Sighing blissfully, his moment of tranquility was interrupted by Golubtsov's gruff voice on the other end. After cursory greetings, Bolotov asked about his informants. We're still working on them pretty hard, boss. But don't worry, we're good at talking. Bolotov, satisfied, reminded him that he needed the documents implicating another half-dozen party members at his office before he got there, and Golubtsov assured him that they were already there. After a sinister, "Don't make me come looking," he placed the phone back on the receiver, unrolled his sleeve, and went to leave. As he reached the front door, he stuffed himself into his warm jacket and felt the cold metal of the pistol he always kept with him. He planned to use that gun that day. Oh, I'm using the something new. I'm using the the original TNO beta font mod. I forget what exactly it's called, but I want to mix it up a little bit, and the text does look a little different. I think it's kind of cool. So glad to be using it. Georgy Shekharev checked the time on his watch, 8:45 in the morning. Time enough for the leader of the Black Shirts, the RFP's paramilitary wing, to make his way to the party headquarters for his meeting. Sitting at his desk, he pulled out 2 leather-bound books, one black, one brown. Opening the spine crack of the black book, he looked at his appointments for the day to be sure he wouldn't miss any. As he looked well into the afternoon, he grimaced. A conference with Security Minister Alexander Bolotov and the Voz himself. The Voz he could handle, despite its leader's seemingly ever-increasing paranoia. It was Bolotov he couldn't stomach. With their lunge into Russia proper, following the collapse of the Soviet Union, the RFP had a shot at forming a legitimate state to abandon the thuggery and mafia-like tactics which had defined their stay in the city of Harbin. It wasn't the violence Shekharev disliked, it was the seemingly mindless character that was associated with Bolotov's unique brand. As if he and those in his employ were rabid dogs, Bolotov apparently had no intuition to ever depart from his ways, despite Shekharev's continued urgings. If Shekharev wasn't integral and a good friend of Voz, he was sure he would have been shot by the morphine addict long ago. Closing the black book and opening the brown, he looked through his journal, meticulously kept ever since the early days of involvement with the party. He remembered his failed career as a teacher and a tinge of yearning for the days of Harbin. Looking at the faded leather, the Japanese leader of the Black Shirts resolved that he would serve faithfully in his post, both officially in the Black Shirts and unofficially as a force for civilizing the party he loved. Humanizing the Vost? Why? I think I'm going to wait until we hear back from Japan about Hainan Pao. If I hear from him at any point, of course. Next we'll do God, Nation, and Labor. God, Nation, Labor. With this slogan, the Russian Fascist Party made itself known when the first formed by the visionary member of the white emigres in Harbin. In those words lie power and strength of Russian fascism as a constructive force, directed towards recovery and improvement of the all-Russian state. On those glorious principles, a reborn Russia will sit on with dignity, a Russia without the tainting influence of Jewish materialism and the cannibalistic notions of class struggle. But the dream of nationalist Russia, guided by God and bonded by collaboration between classes, will remain an unreachable dream if every Russian fascist will not discipline himself to the most glorious cause, will not be ready to sacrifice his life for the service of the Russian nation. To oversee the transformation of the all-Russian state, the party will take the affairs of the spiritual and material world into its own hands, guiding the obedient people to the enlightened spirit of fascism. Any second, if the Japanese could get back to me on the port, I kind of decided that's what I'm gonna... There we go. Joyous day. Glorious happy day. The Japanese, ever our stalwart ally against the Reds and their servants, have agreed to cede Blagoveshchensko Russian government. It's been a little over a year since we've first heard confirmation that the Japanese Diet would review our request, and that wait has finally paid off. This morning, a one-man Japanese delegation arrived on plane to formally hand over this territory, with the Voz putting signatures to the agreement in his Zaya headquarters. In return for ceding Blagoveshchensk, we have granted the Japanese special rights to some of the natural resources in far eastern Siberia. Once we secure those resources and unite the region under a stable government, resultant trade and mining deals will no doubt prove extremely fruitful for our reborn Russian state. For now, the Voss has publicly confirmed that he will travel to his hometown post-haste for a grand celebration now that it's officially back in Russian hands. Doubtless, the people will be overjoyed to live in an enlightened National Socialist rule, rather than the uncaring and distant Manchus. Today, Blagoveshchensk, tomorrow, Moscow. Beautiful. And I think on that note, my friends, we can go ahead and do new agricultural methods, methinks. Yeah, I'm going to leave it there, ladies and gentlemen, but thank you as always for watching. If you like this video, leave a like. If not, feel free to dislike. If you have any comments, feedback, or anything of the sort, leave in the comment section below. I read all the comments. Again, appreciate any all feedback you might have for me. If you want to keep up to date with my uploads, hit the sub button. I have uploads going up weekdays as well as occasionally Saturdays. If you have any comments, feedback, concern, leave in the comment section below. I think I already said that, so if I did, ignore that. But if not, comment section below, check it out. If you want to go ahead and see me do this sort of stuff live, I have a Twitch, send a few bucks my way, Patreon, chat or play games, Discord, and if you want to see me do non-gaming link content, I have a second channel. All those are down in the description box below. Thanks always for watching, my friends. My name has been Mr. Dogboat333. I thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.